Well, this might ruffle some feathers. Look, before I start, the lights behind me are set to random. They're on the Independence Day theme, so if they go any weird colours, I'm just testing them, and you can blame the Americans for winning the war, right? I would probably set it to a British theme, but that's not what this is going to be about. This is about the Tomorrow War, and I have to be honest, I went into this with some very, very good ideas. Everyone that I'd talked to had said how great the movie was, and they were all saying what was great for me. Chris Pratt, I love. I think he's a great actor, and I think he's a good person. He seems to have a great moral character, and so when I see him in a movie, that's going to get me interested. And people were saying how it was a popcorn flick. It was an action film, and that's right up my street. You see, action films for me are something that I'm always been very interested in. Your plot itself, it's just not enough. It's not enough to set it up. It's not enough to explain it. And so there are very few films where the plot of them actually grab me. And I've always been more attracted to just explosions. Explosions, death, gore, and violence. That's what I want to see in a movie. I love action movies. Those are what keep me entertained. And if the action never stops, then I'll never stop being entertained. And that's what I was hoping this movie was, because that's kind of what people explained it as. They said the plot was awful, but the action was great. And that's about as good as a review as you can make for a movie for me. And it's not what I got, and maybe that's why I'm disappointed. Maybe if I'd not heard that anyone recommend it, maybe I would have liked it more than I actually did. You see, 47 minutes into watching The Tomorrow War, and there's only been one interesting scene. So far, I'm so bored, I hope none of them come back. Now, admittedly, this tweet was probably quite poorly timed, because I actually made notes during it, and 49 minutes into the movie, it kicked off. And it really did. I mean, from 49 minutes, I thought the movie really stepped up quite a big notch, and I enjoyed it a lot more after that time mark. But doesn't that say something about a movie that I had to wait 49 minutes before anything happened in the movie that I thought was any good? All I wanted to do in the first 47 minutes of this movie was leave. If people hadn't recommended me, I never would have stayed this long. I was so bored, I wanted to eat my own foot, just so I could feel something. My body was turning off, my brain was turning off, and you know what? You know what kept me sticking with it? It wasn't just the reviews, it was the fact that the critics hated this movie. They really did. And that is one of the reasons why I stayed with it. And I can't help it. It's been a long time that I have realized that if critics hate a movie, it is probably good. And they really, really hated this movie. Even when I was 10, pre-internet, I realized if critics hated the movie, it was a good movie. And we're going back to like before the internet actually existed, right? Before the internet actually existed, I would go to a local newspaper and read the reviews of the movie that I was about to see in the cinema. And if the critics hated it, I'd probably like it. If the critics liked it, I was going to be so bored, I probably wouldn't need to go. And I've always thought if a film actually got an Oscar, then by God, I would hate that thing. So it's always been a very reliable metric for me. Why? Because what they like is boring twaddle. They just love stuff that really... There's a certain group of people where basically they're midwits. They might be slightly more intelligent than a lot of people, but really, they really want to seem intelligent, and yet they're just not. It really isn't. So they have to write things into movies, into art, into theatre that just doesn't exist. And that I find incredibly dull. Now, they'll watch it and they go, oh my God, have you seen how the metaphysical reaction of the extra-dimensional travel that really is a great conversation about the cosmos that is the human condition, if only a microcosm of the human condition, as was once said in a Kotaku article. And those kind of people I can't stand. I can't, and their opinions I can't stand. And so when they hate something, when they say, God, have you seen this? It was so awful. It's like people who were just dying, they were getting shot, their arms were getting ripped off, and everything exploded. I'm like, yes, give me more. I'm just not insecure enough to need that extra twaddle in my movies. And so when they hated it, and I saw the actual audience loved it, it gave me hope. It really did. And it only went through when I read there are other critics, and they're like, oh my God, this has all been seen before. It throws Aliens, The Terminator, and A Quiet Place into a blender. You've seen it all before, and I'm like, yes, Yes, give me more. That's all I want. It's a blandly derivative, an overlong sci-fi thriller. I'm like, okay, it's derivative. These are people that are taking the best parts of other movies and throwing them in a blender. How can this be wrong? It's never connected on an emotional level. I don't need it to. Your emotions are nonsense. What I want is blood, gore, and action. There's nothing tomorrow about a recycled sci-fi jumble. Yes, take the best bits of the movies that came before and give it to me. Just hook it to my veins. And the only review that I've seen in this list is that Chris Pratt is no Tom Cruise. And to be honest, I have to give him that, but with no wisecracking, no cheeky grins, it can only get better. I want him to see him blow aliens in the face. Not in that way. And so, when we get down to the movie, none of that is what I actually got, you see. What I got was 2.5 hour long movie of a movie that was really just an hour long. The only bits that I wanted were an hour long, and the action scenes were awesome. They really were. When it comes to him fighting aliens in the future, it did an amazing job. And even the final scene, even the bit where, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but even afterwards in the kind of the ending narrative, I even like that. All of that was awesome. And the actors in it are also awesome. But my issue with it is, there just wasn't enough of what I liked. Anyone that calls it an action film, I don't know if we really watched the same film. There are definitely action sequences. There were definitely shooting things. There were definitely scenes that gave a very Starship Troopers vibe. And that is what I loved. Those sections are incredible. And I have to say, the person that made the music for the film, spot on. I mean, he really did his best with what he got. If you want something that kind of... The music that went on really did nail the atmosphere at every point that it could. And it just wasn't enough. There's too much talking about people's feelings. There really is. And although I know it really tried to give this sort of fatherly-daughter bond, I can't help it. I just hated her. I thought she was awful. She's really there trying to desperately build this bond, trying to desperately give us the narrative of... She just comes across as an arsehole. I'm sorry, I really am. It's not what I wanted to say. None of that is what I say. I really appreciate the sort of the father-daughter bonds that you get in other things, that you can get in other work. And like, if you go and look at from video games, The Last of Us, I really appreciated that kind of father-daughter bond. And they weren't even father and daughter. And if you can nail that kind of emotional connection, I think it's awesome. But I just wasn't getting it in this movie, and it really tried. In fact, I think it tried too hard. I think that was the problem. It kept on hammering you in the face, but when it got down to it and he met her, she just didn't give a crap, and he's desperately trying, and she's just being an arse to him, and at the end, I'm like, just cut it all out. And honestly, I know in the current day and age, there's a huge negative emotion to showing positive fathers. And he really nailed the positive father role model. So I can see why people appreciated that, but I just can't help thinking that if this was any other era, if this was a movie that was even 5 years ago, everyone would be agreeing with me. The movie just was average at best. It really was. I think people have been so starved for such basic quality in the current movies that even when an average movie comes along, they hail it as awesome simply because it doesn't pander to the people that have literally ruled Hollywood in recent times. And you know what? I agree that they've destroyed Hollywood. But I'm still bored. I'm still sitting here just thinking, oh my god, I could eat my own foot. I really need to eat my own foot just so I can feel something again. And that, no matter how many times you shoot an alien in the face, and no matter how often that was entertaining, there was just so much nonsense in the film. And I'm not even on about the plot. I'm just on about how literally nothing happens for vast swathes of time. And that is my problem with the movie. This was a movie that if you cut out the title scenes, there's probably about 2 hours and 10 minutes. And in the grand total of it, I think I even tweeted how long I probably thought there was of a movie. It was about 45 minutes of movie in an 130-minute package. And it really was. Like, you literally could have cut off about half of this movie, and I don't think anything of value would be lost. You still could have got the father-daughter scenario in there. You still could have got the narrative with his wife, and you could have kept the movie going at a pace that would have stopped me being so bored. And you know what I think it was? This came from Amazon. This wasn't your big Hollywood budget movie. And yet, the action scenes were easily on par with that. All of the quality of what was on screen was amazing. It really was. Whatever they spent on the movie was clearly enough. At no point did I think you've done this on the cheap. And yet, I do think that the timer was just, we need to be this long, and you just had to put a lot of filler in there. I think they spent the budget on the action scenes. I think that all the helicopters and everything else were probably very expensive to do. And you just couldn't do that for the entire movie. And I think that's a shame. Because when this movie was good, it was excellent. When it had the action scenes, it was incredible. But there just wasn't enough. And maybe that was a budgetary limit. Maybe they had to do the waffling on about various different stuff that I just didn't care about. It just wasn't for me. It just wasn't stuff that could never happen in real life. And that is explosions and gun scenes and action and death and violence and gore. All of the good, really masculine scenes in a movie. That is what I'm interested in. And I just don't care about whether he divorces his wife. I don't care. This is a man that doesn't exist. I don't care whether he loves his wife and divorces her in the future. None of that matters to me. I want to watch you slaughter another massive horde coming across. I want to see your life be put in danger. I want to see things that I could never witness. And really, if I wanted to watch someone fall out with his girlfriend, then I'd go and get one. It's not that difficult, look. But when I think back to it, to me, if I had to sum it up, this is a movie that I wouldn't want to see this is a movie that I wouldn't want to see in the cinema. I really wouldn't. This is a movie that you'd have on in the background, and when the set pieces come in, you might full screen it on your monitor and focus on it. But when it comes to everything else, it's just background noise. And maybe that's how it was designed. Maybe they thought that this would be something that people would watch at their computer. People would watch on a second monitor. And in those cases, then it fulfills that role. It fulfills the time required. When it comes to movie reviews, I don't know whether to give stuff a rating or not. But if I did, I'm probably thinking at best it's a 6 out of 10. It's probably more of a 5. And you know why? Do you know why it's a 5 and not a 10? Because I only like half of the movie. I only like the action scenes. I only like the scenes where it actually has anything happen in it at all. And if you cut out the rest, I would have give you a 10. If it was just the action scenes, if I'm just judging where the aliens are on screen, then I'd probably give it a 10. But every other scene where there isn't an alien, by God, I was so bored. It really was. And this isn't down to the actors, this is just down to literally the fact that nothing is happening. I don't care about any of you, and you haven't given me a reason to. And I don't know whether that's my fault or not. And I know a lot of people will disagree with that score. I know a lot of people go, look, it's so much better than everything else we've got now, and I agree with you. But that's, to me, I'm not going to judge stuff relatively. If a film isn't good, I'm not going to judge it as good. And I don't think this was. Yes, it was good in sections. Yes, there was an incredible amount of entertainment in parts. But I've got to judge a 2 hour and 10 minute long film about something that gave me 45 minutes of entertainment. I'm not the kind of person that thinks this kind of thing is relative. I can't judge this according to other movies that are out at the moment. You know why? Because I don't do that with anything. I think there is an objective standard of quality. I think I can judge this compared to what a movie should be. And that's how I would judge everything. And that comes down to games and everything else. Just because everything else is awful doesn't mean that when something comes across which is passable, I'm going to give it a good score. And that's how I end up with this. I think Chris Pratt did an awesome job. I think the action scenes in it are incredible. I think all of the stuff... There's some amazing scenes where you get to see the military in the future in action and the helicopters, and all of the action scenes are incredibly well done. I think the graphics are awesome. I think the idea that you've got for the aliens is really well done. I like all of that. I just don't like everything else that surrounds it. I just don't care about these people. I don't care about their emotions. I don't care about the fake plot that you've kind of made to get people into the stuff. And I don't think the movie should either. I think if this movie had come out and gone, look, we're just an action film. And yes, we're going to give you some arbitrary reason to get you into the action, but we get past that as fast as possible and into the brutal slaughter. I would have been right there with you. I would have been giving you a 10, but it's not what we got. They really thought they could do the hybrid style of action movie and plot. And they don't. They fail. It really does. It really fails awfully. Either you should do a plot and focus on the plot and make that plot astounding, or you should be an action film. And I really think, given the quality of what you had here when it came to action, you just should have focused on that. You fail so much on the other stuff. You fail so much on the action, so much on the character scenes, so much on the supposed emotional scenes that you tried to do, that there's literally no way I can like them. There's no way. And I'm not going to pretend that they were good when they're not. And so for me, there were times when I really enjoyed it. There were times where I thought this movie was incredible. And it was just surrounded by so much fluff and so much boredom. That by the end of it, that's all I thought about. All I could remember is the moments when I was so bored, I wanted to eat my own foot. Just so I could feel at least something once more. And so, when it comes down to it, all I can say is, if you're okay with a lot of waffle, if you can see past the boring parts of the movie, then there is some good sections, some good scenes, and some good parts of this movie. But otherwise, I don't know, I just think there's so much better things you could be doing with your time. Well, that's it from me. If you liked the video, press like. If you didn't, you know what to do. And comment below what you thought of the video, what you thought of the movie, what are your best scenes, what did you think were the worst scenes, how do you think it could be improved? Do you disagree? Do you agree? Let me know down below. And with that, I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.